Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Walking Dead. A lot of interesting things went on in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, this episode gives us a little more insight into what is Maggie's been up to, because we haven't seen Maggie since the multiple time skips in season 9. We haven't seen her subsequently since then, so this is kind of her first time fully catching up with what she's kind of been up to. Obviously, kind of, picking up fairly soon after the aftermaths of everything that went down in the previous episode, the kind of pseudo-season finale. And lo and behold, obviously she's talking to Judith about, the whole Michonne situation of she likes to look up to the stars and think, my mom's seeing the same stars. It's Maggie's she likes to do the same thing too, knowing that, hey, Michonne, everyone we care about is out there somewhere looking up at the same stars as well. And then lo and behold, who should she run into? None other than Negan. And Negan's like, hey, Maggie. Maggie doesn't say anything. She's so frustrated looking at him, seeing him. Because the last time she saw him, because she hasn't seen him in years, but at the very least, she took some solace in knowing, yes, the son of a gun is still alive, but at the very least, he's locked up. For him to be free out and about, it's just frustrating. And you see, that's the thing, though. Negan is a little, he can't take back what he's done. He can try to make up for it, but even then, that's not going to be enough. There's always going to be people who will never forgive him for what he's done, how he terrorized people, how he killed people, how he's responsible for so much death, because not just what he caused, but also the people under him, when it came to the saviors, what they were responsible for. So, and he's just like, well, shit. So initially, Maggie's trying to find a new place for her community because obviously their village apparently got attacked, so they're kind of without a place right now. So at first she's thinking of could we get introduced to Cole and Elijah? And it's okay, so we'll take them to Hilltop. But then it's we got to show you what happened at Hilltop. And I thought it was interesting because Carol immediately tells her, yeah, this happened. Negan was on the Whisperer side. And then she turns, it was you that let him out. And it's yes, Negan had to get close to the Whisperers. It's Alpha had to die. And it's now it's a situation of there's not any other communities for her to stay in, because it's the only other community nearby is Alexandria, and that has the resources that allow for her people to move in. So it's obviously the kingdom's gone, so Hilltop was the only other option. Now she literally has no choice but to be in the exact same place the man that murdered her husband, as well as the father of her child. And even, Cole was oh, you expect her to live in the same place? And even Daryl being you didn't have to tell her that, but it's no, I owed it to her, because for Carol, it's I'm not, because if she held on to it, it would have felt oh, you were trying to hide it the entire time. And it's but also it's I'm the reason why this all played out. I played my own role in it. What happened when Negan was undercover and everything, that falls back on me because this was my plan. So I owe her that much as well, because I'm the reason why. Because there's also got to be a level of, and she talks about it a little bit later on, but Maggie's got to feel responsible too, because she's I wasn't there. Hilltop was her responsibility until she up and left. She had her personal reasons, but it's obviously all the stuff with Georgie, but also it's she could have come back at any time, but she chose not to, because for her, she needed space away from Negan constantly occupying space in her mind. And the thought of coming back to that, it would have been too much. So she decided not to come back. And so for her, it's a thing of maybe things could have been different. So much happened. Jesus died, who took over the reins afterwards. And who was the next person who took over the reins? Tara, and Tara's gone now too. Especially because they're not going to go into that. But let's not forget how Tara came into the group. It was by Glenn. So that's probably another angle to this too. It's her being gone now too is a representation of just it's a lot of the ties that brought connected a lot to Glenn are gone too. I think that's a deeper level to something I've never really thought about till now. Obviously it doesn't come up in the episode, but I'm curious if that crosses Maggie's mind at all. Because Tara's also the one who brought Glenn back to her, regardless of the circumstances under which they met. It's you brought Glenn back to me, and she was so happy and indebted to Tara for that, so I wonder, does that kind of sit wrong with her a little bit in that regard too? Obviously the same thing, Jesus taking up the responsibility and him, dying when she had never came back to Hilltop. At least that's how I feel about the whole situation. I'm curious. Because we don't get 100% insight into like everything that's going through Maggie's mind, but I'm just curious if any of that does necessarily correlate. So obviously they're making their way to Alexandria. We also had, really quickly before, I'm about to bring up, Kelly decides to go with Daryl because, hey, you're going to go to Alexandria. That means you're going to be crossing some territories we haven't checked yet. She's like, I just want to go to make sure, potentially look for Connie. But, Daryl completely understands. He's like, all right, let's go. But the conversation, with Carol, which I thought was interesting, was like, Carol was saying Maggie's never going to forgive Negan. And, she's never going to see Negan a different way. And Daryl asked, and is like, does she see Negan a different way? Because was Negan always just a means to an end? But yes, he did what he did. But it's like, we even said it ourselves. We couldn't have done this without Negan. He brought an end to this war. He helped bring an end to the Whisper. So it's like, it's a thing of like, because even she shrugs because she doesn't even give an answer whether she sees Negan differently, because he was, I guess in her mind, it's like he was a blunt object. He was an object that was needed, so the ends justify the means. But beyond his usefulness in that situation, do I see him differently? Is he still the monster we've always kind of known him to be, that we locked away? I don't know, and that's the question that, and later on Daryl talks about. It's like, we are all still in a process of figuring out this Negan situation, because because Judith, I think, is not going to be all about killing him, because I think even she in her own ways kind of got a soft spot for Negan. Lydia kind of does as well, because it's like, yeah, you killed my mom, which is always going to be an angle, but it's like there's a complicated like outsiderness that they both have, but she's a little more accepted because like obviously she helped take down her people, but Negan is still it's a little different, because at least Lydia's got the case of being like a kid. It's kind of what she was growing up and knowing, so there's that. Negan's under different circumstances. It's just a complicated, interesting thing, and you can tell like how much it all bothers Maggie, because obviously when they were initially heading to Alexandria, she's like, no, we gotta go like, because I think for her it's like she needs to focus on just moving, because if she stops, she's going to stop and thinking about Negan and everything. She's trying to get back to Herschel, and like that's all she's trying to focus on. She's trying to focus on the good, because if she takes time to stop, she's going to be worrying more and more about Herschel, because when they do eventually stop, and it's like, all right, we got to clear this place, but you had Daryl being like, no, we could find like higher ground, but it's like, no, we're gonna sleep. So I think it's like Maggie's probably like, either they've spent so much time wandering around kind of having to do it's like, no, at least somewhere comfortable. We need to at least stay somewhere comfortable after everything we've been through. But also maybe Maggie just remembering all the times they had, like prior to them getting to Alexandria, building up Hilltop, and everything. I think it's like she remembers that all too well with the original group, like not having like like times without having an actual place to sleep. But also it's like, I think it's like, we're not going to backpedal a little bit. We're going to keep going forward in that regard. So they're clearing all those walkers, and we learn a little bit more about what Maggie went through. Like obviously, like Georgie had heard about some other stuff and went to go check it out. But in the time that she was gone, because they were letting in other people, building out the community more and more until they were attacked, and they kind of had to scatter. She's like, I haven't seen Georgie since then. It's like at that time she could have come back home, but she chose not to. She went to a place that like her family owned, because it was somewhere her and Glenn were going to go together, but they never had an opportunity. So she took Herschel there, and it was away from everything. It was just kind of nice, but it's also to the point Herschel's asking about what happened to his dad and the bad man that's responsible, like, what happened to him. So I think those are complicated questions she knew were going to come, but I think even she wasn't really prepared for how she was going to potentially answer that. So, but also what happened to her people, she hasn't really gone into, like, and I think it's fascinating, like, why she hasn't. Is it because of what happened to them, or is it because what happened to them because of something she or her community did? Like, maybe they crossed the line and made some enemies, and that led to but it could simply just be like just the way later, because I don't know whether it's like, because later on she makes it seem like obviously this group, we end up finding out they're called the Reapers, ended up like slaughtering them, coming after them for no reason, is how Maggie puts it. But I'm wondering, is there a deeper angle to this? Because obviously they run into some of their other people later on, because eventually like everyone kind of splits up. I really quickly want to focus on that scene with Kelly. Kind of, it's like she was on guard duty, but she goes off on her own, which, you know, Maggie was like, whoa, you can't go off on your own, you could get killed. But it's like, she was like, I had to find Connie, you know, Daryl's like, her sister's missing, which obviously Maggie can understand that more so than anything when she went looking for Beth, you know. And that's the sad thing about it, is like, you know, her story didn't end well when it came to looking for her sister, but, you know, I'm sure she's hoping and praying that Connie's situation, Kelly's situation with Connie plays out way differently. Because obviously it's more even heartbreaking when you think about it, because she was that close to getting her sister back, but just to have Beth get killed right in front of her, like, you know, hopefully, once again, that tragedy doesn't end up ultimately happening. But for, like I said, Maggie understanding that pain better than anyone, but also brings up the fact is Elijah, you know, the one in the mask and everything, he lost his sister recently too. But she was even talking to Daryl, being like, do you think she's still out there? He's like, I don't know. I hope so. Like, we've been looking for her. And it's like, at the end of the day, he's kind of like, maybe she's better off not knowing about, you know, whatever happened to Kelly. Because she had said, Maggie had said the line of, even if you do find them, there's no guarantee you'll be able to get them back. So like, if you find them, you know, just like she got so close to Beth and that was kind of ripped away from her, you know, it's like, if you find Connie, maybe like she might not be human anymore. She might be a walker, or she might be taken away from you just before, when you're, you know, life is unfair like that. But it's also that conversation of, should you or do you want to know? And Maggie saying, like, you should know. Like, the worry, the what ifs, like, that is what's going to drive you crazy. But obviously, watching something recently, knowing the truth is never always what you kind of want to know. But at the same time, it's like, when you find out the truth, you kind of give anything to erase that truth, you know? You'd give anything not to know those details. So that's kind of a complicated, you know, thing. But, obviously, Maggie takes them, obviously, to meet up with the rest of their people, but it turns out where they were, they got attacked. Obviously, Cole is like, this was definitely the Reapers. This had to be them, like no one else. We were so careful about this, but it's like somehow they found us, and it's like, we don't know that it's them, but Cole's like, we do know. So, but it was this thing of them splitting up. And what I thought was so fascinating is like Elijah, as they were walking away, like he's looking back at Maggie as she's leaving with Daryl. I'm wondering, like, probably like Maggie was there for him when he lost his sister, so it's probably a situation of like he feels a kindred spiritness to her, like she kind of kept him going. So if she's not around, I think it's because like when he's with Kelly and Cole, like he kind of freezes up and she's like, it's okay, and he lifts up his mask and she's like, can you, and either he can't talk, or maybe like the psychological trauma of it, he doesn't talk anymore. Either way, she's like, I'm here with you, like I got you, like you're not in this alone. So I think Maggie's kind of like has been his means of like keep going forward, but without her around, he kind of shuts down a little bit. But Kelly kind of brought him back. So, but at the same time, Maggie and Daryl end up running into more of her people, but slowly and systematically they get wiped out. Even to the point like one of them gets injured just to draw draw one other in to just end up killing them both. It's just, it's sad, you know? And luckily Daryl and Maggie were able to confront the guy. Because I was wondering, like, okay, is this going to be connected to the guy that, is he going to be connected to the people that kidnapped Ezekiel and them at the end of the last episode? Or, you know, which I'm assuming they're connected to the Republic, that whole thing in World Beyond. Once again, I think it's in Fear the Walking Dead, but I still haven't gotten that far in this show yet. I still need to take time to catch up completely before the season returns. But so I was wondering, like, if this group had, and the fact is, the group that took Maggie, that will attack Maggie's people, that dude in particular was kind of in camouflage. So I don't know if this is kind of like a militia thing, similar to the Similar to like the governor, but also I'm blanking on his name already. It's home dude from season 3, 2/3, because his people pop up at the end of 2, but they're mainly in 3. The farm or whatever, where God, I'm blanking on home dude's name. I had to look it up, Otto, because I was blanking on their name. Like Otto and his people. I wonder if it was kind of something in a similar vein as that. Is that kind of what this is? Because home dude, it's not talking. Also, he's not just some punk. He seems well trained, the way he kind of took down Daryl and Maggie, setting up the traps and everything, having the high-powered weapons that he does. Like, I mean, I guess there's always like, hey, you just get lucky and come across, but it just seemed too tactically ready, and that seems a little different from the Republic, so that's why I'm like, this might just be a separate group altogether. But it's like, why did you come after us? Who are you? And it's like, came after you because you were marked by Pope. Now, I wasn't sure if that was a name that Maggie knew or so. It seems like we've got another group entirely out there, like a militia level organized group that just systematically decides, we're going to wipe people out. Like, why they were marked by Pope, like I said, maybe this has something to do with something Maggie and her people did. Maybe this has something to do with Georgia. I don't know. Because we still don't know where things kind of look on that front. Like whether, like I said, whether or not these two things are connected. Maybe he's just a special unit person that was sent out. So, because obviously he was dressed up the way he was for camouflage, but I feel like if he was connected to Republic, he would have been wearing like a lot more like Kevlar gear, which he kind of was, but you know, I feel like he would have been suited out like the people that took Ezekiel and them. So that's why I'm kind of thinking maybe that's a separate thing. But regardless, dedicated to whatever their cause is so that they don't torture him and use him for information, he blows himself up, you know. So I wasn't expecting something that brutal. I was like, because he had the knife in his hand, I thought he was going to slit his own throat. I thought that's where we were going, but no. So that was kind of, you know, lost some people along the way. They don't even have any guy to interrogate. So all they can do is keep moving forward, trying to find Herschel, as, you know, Daryl's help tracking them, but luckily they find Herschel, you know, and it's obviously this is our first time seeing him all, you know, not all grown up, but older now. And there was that conversation between Kelly and Maggie, the whole conversation about Connie. It's like, you know, who's the oldest? And it's like, you know, Connie is. She's like, my parent, like I was kind of a surprise for my parents, and they were kind of already old and tired by the time I came around. So Connie looked after me, even when she was kind of living her own life. She always did what she could to look after me. So I guess that's why Kelly always felt the need to kind of like, under these circumstances, always be there as like the one to translate, because I think for her it's like she always wanted in her own way to repay her sister for all the years she's looked after her. It's like I think that was kind of her potentially her thought. And so, and also it led to that conversation, you know, about Maggie. It's like, you had a sister too, right? You're the oldest. And she's like, did someone tell you that? How'd you know? She's like, I just kind of got a feeling for it. Like the way Maggie is about people, the way you protect people is like, those are elements that are kind of like someone who's used to kind of doing that, you know? And, you know, Maggie's like, I hope one day I get to meet your sister. And, Kelly's like, you will. So she was also thankful to Kelly for looking out for Elijah for her, you know. So you know, and even Elijah bought her some food, and it's kind of, you know, showing that they're cool. Like, so he's found someone else that kind of helped ground him out like Maggie does. So I thought that was kind of neat. But obviously it's a whole conversation too about like, well, we'll take the long way back to Alexandria to see kind of what's what, make sure no one else is out here, because he was alone, but that doesn't mean some others from his group, the Reapers or whatever, won't eventually come back around, checking in on him and seeing what he might have stumbled across. Like, who knows what was the last thing he reported to them. But Maggie's like, for right now, getting to Alexandria is all that matters. You know, her son needs to have a home and a place right now. And being around others, you know, it's like, because obviously being back home wasn't 100% what she wanted, but it was the circumstances called for it. Because she even said, like, at one point, the reason why she never responded to the letters that were left is because she wasn't really in a position where she could. And eventually she got to a position where she could be in reach to those letters, but she didn't, because it would just been like, she on some level probably felt like whatever it was would have been calling for her to go back home, and she just wasn't like quite ready. But I think maybe that's something she's going to live with too, feeling like maybe if I was here, maybe things would have been different like that. But it's like there's not much you can do. The past can't be changed, and that resonates not just with Maggie, but also with but it also applies to Negan as well. And obviously we see Alexandria not in the best condition. It's like obviously one last little parting gift from the Whisperers, but they're planning on making this their home for the time being, you know. And obviously she's walking by and Negan's nearby, and you can see her just like kind of clenching her teeth and just being so close to him, even seeing his face, you know, him out and about, having his freedom. And like it, you know, it's like it was kind of a necessary thing of Carol did what she needed to do, but it doesn't make it any easier for her seeing him free out and about while her son has to grow up only hearing stories about Glenn and not being able to actually meet. Like that hat he's wearing, that's not Glenn's hat, is it? Because I'm also wondering if I'm confusing Glenn in this, because it's been so long. I'm wondering, am I confusing Glenn in this with Glenn from the Telltale Walking Dead game? Because that's supposed to be the same Glenn, but I'm sure they probably fudged the continuity a little bit, because I think that's probably more in line with that one's more in line with the comic book Glenn and not the TV show Glenn. Because obviously for a while the show went a little off course with the comic book, still kind of has been, because obviously there's people that are alive in the comics that are dead in the show, or people that are alive in the show that are dead in the comics, you know. So there's that whole angle to it too. But this episode presented some interesting stuff, like I said, giving us more insight into Maggie's situation. But I'm curious where everything else is going to take us going forward. There are going to be, so there's 5 more new episodes after this. I'm curious to see what stories they kind of tell. It seems like I'm wondering, were these ever originally going to be stories that were going to be part of season 11? Or are these stories that they were like, oh, we can use these to kind of, maybe these are storylines that maybe they would have skipped. Oh, I don't know. I feel like they seem like they're important stories that they would have included as part of season 11. But I guess it's like, well, we'll bridge them out. Because I think at the time of them doing these episodes, they hadn't even started season 11 production stuff yet. I don't think. I could be mistaken. So these might have been early season 11 things that they decided, all right, we'll push them and make them 10, see, like the third chunk of season 10. So maybe that's just kind of, maybe they shifted like the direction season 11 goes, it being not only the final season, but then pushing these episodes as bonus episodes to season 10 rather than being attached to season 11. I don't know. I could be easily thinking too much of it. It's just kind of an interesting production situation, I think. But nevertheless, I'm really curious to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all this. There's a lot of people to kind of check up on. We know at least some, or at least one of these episodes is going to focus on Ezekiel and them. Now, whether we get a conclusion to their situation, I don't know. I get the feeling we'll probably be bouncing around, spending time with like one group at a time. Maybe some episodes will have us bouncing back and forth. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where it all ends up taking us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.